In 2012, art critic and writer for The Guardian, Jonathan Jones, published a hit piece complaining to the Museum of Modern Arts that video games should not be considered a form of high art. He listed several inaccurate reasons in his article, and the three we'll be discussing today are that video games are for children, video games take too many collaborators, and video games don't require interpretation. I'm Fatal Foxtrot, and today we'll be disputing those claims and explaining why video games should be considered a form of high art. The first complaint Mr. Jones had with video games is that video games are for children and not meant to be appreciated by adults. This is not always the case. Let me introduce you to a video game called Persona 5. Persona 5 discusses themes like suicide, sexual assault, murder, corruption in the government, and much more. Because of this, the Electronic Software Rating Board gave Persona 5 an M for mature rating. This means you have to be 17 years or older to purchase this game or have an adult present with you. Therefore, one can say that a game like Persona 5 is definitely not for children. The next problem Jonathan had with video games being considered a form of art is that video games require too many collaborators to create. While this is sometimes the case, as in developers like Activision and Atlas and EA, where they have hundreds of developers working on it at a time, again, this is not always the case, as is the case with Stardew Valley. You may remember Stardew Valley from my demonstrative speech earlier in this course. What you may not know is that according to Metacritic.com, all of the characters, the sprites, the visuals, the music, and everything was created by one person, a man named Concerned Ape, or Eric Barone. As you can see from my visual aid, all of these characters are painstakingly created to be individual and colorful and be full of character. Pixel art should count as art. As you can see, all of these pieces were painstakingly created, one square at a time. This is arguably more effort than a painting might have, and therefore should be given the same respect as painting. The third and last problem that Mr. Jones had with video games being considered art is that video games do not require interpretation, like art would. As you may imagine, this is not the case, as is the case with Journey, a PlayStation 4 game. Journey has vague and symbolic imagery all over the place. Nothing is designed to make sense to the player, and most people who play Journey have a different interpretation of the events that go down. This can be seen with a review by Kevin Van Ord from GameSpot, who describes the game as having a different connection with the heart, a direct connection with the heart. Because of this, we can say that video games do, in fact, require interpretation and should be appreciated on the same scale as painting and sculpting. Video games can be made for adults, so that this proves that video games are for children, as was the case with Persona 5, where a dark and twisted storyline should not be in the hands of a child. Video games can also be made by just one person, as it was the case with Stardew Valley, and a painstaking effort went into that, as much or more so than a painting or a sculpture. Again, meaning that video games should be considered on those levels as far as work put into it is considered. Video games inspire the imagination, as was the case with Journey, with its beautiful and symbolic visuals that all people who play Journey have a different interpretation of. I hope after this speech you begin to accept video games as a form of art and give it the respect it deserves. like paintings, sculpting, photography, cinema, all these things are considered forms of art, but video games, by some, are not, because due to a stigma that dates back to when video games first came around. Nobody wanted to accept it. Everybody considered it as children, but that's just simply not the case anymore. Thank you.